All right, this week, the failing New York Times had to pull back on a podcast because it was full of fake news. The Caliphate podcast aired, quote, false, exaggerated accounts from one of its main subjects. The Times called itself on the carpet in a series of articles this week. Should we be surprised? Let's bring in Amber Athey. She is the Washington editor for The Spectator. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning.
All right, so New York Times, which everybody calls fake news anyway, puts out a story, an entire, theatrical story about the Caliphate, and it's all fake news? Are you kidding me?
This was one of the New York Times' most popular podcasts, and for good reason. They had someone who claimed to be a member of the ISIS religious police in Syria, talking about all of these fantastical stories about stabbing people in the heart and then hanging them up on crosses to die, shooting people in the head, beheading individuals. I mean, who wouldn't want to listen to a podcast about something so crazy and have this inside look at a real terrorist figure from ISIS? But unfortunately, as it turns out, this man, the subject of the podcast, was recently arrested for perpetrating a terroristic hoax. And according to Canadian authorities, this person was trying to simply scare members of Canada and the United States by claiming that there was going to be an imminent ISIS attack on those countries. He faces up to 5 years in prison. And so the New York Times, after hearing about the details of his arrest, decided to go back and review the claims that he made in the podcast, and apparently found no independent corroboration of any of them. And they couldn't even determine whether or not he had ever been to Syria in the first place. So from top to bottom, this podcast was a complete hoax.
Sensationalizing terrorism. I mean, that's what we've come to now. Folks, look, Amber, I mean, we know each other briefly, but, I spent 9 years in and out of Iraq, combating some of the worst stuff, the Iranian influence, the AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and various other fighting forces that were anti-coalition. And, I've seen this stuff firsthand, and I've had to go out there and do some of the worst things possible in the heat of war, and have this idiot go back and tell this story that's not true, to sensationalize it, to try to drum up some terroristic support. And the fact that he was allowed and harbored in Canada while he was, are you kidding me? What kind of world are we living in?
It's absolutely disgusting. And I think the worst part on behalf of the New York Times is that they never had an editor look over this guy's claims before he was allowed to say them on the podcast. They admitted this in their article talking about how this was able to be published. And they said they did not have the regular editorial verification that they would have had for any other stories. And when you're dealing with a matter that's so sensitive like terrorism, then you absolutely have to make sure that you are fact-checking every single part of this guy's claims. In one instance, he got away with using a photo that he had taken from Getty Images, which pretty much every journalist in the world has access to Getty Images and can search and find out where that image came from. They didn't even bother to do something as simple as that. So he was passing off these images from the internet as his own. Everything about this was just a huge mistake on the part of the Times. And of course, it calls into question the rest of their reporting as well.
But Amber, this is the thing is, they question every military service member who runs for office, and it's just complete garbage. Amber Athey, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Carl.